To finish off the heat exchanger, what we'll need is 3 fittings, and they're just going to be very simple fittings. And one of them will simply be part of the 16 gauge from the scraps left over. It'll be 3 7/8 inches by 12 inches. The next fitting will be a U shape, which will have 1 inch, 1 inch, and 4 1/8 inch by by 9 inches long. And the final one will be 1 inch, 4 1/8 inch, and 1 inch by 10 inches long. Now remember that one of the scraps that were cut out happened to be 10 inches long, and so that scrap is what will be used to make this one. And of course the other scrap will be used to make that one. And so we've used up almost all the scrap, and all we need is this, and that's about 4 inches by 12 inches to finish off the heat exchanger portion. Here we have the pieces that have been cut out. This is the 4 inch by 12 inch. Now this is going to fit. This is just simply going to fit in the bottom here. Then we're going to seal it, and then we're going to fasten it. And for this one I'm just going to use pop rivets. If you have a spot welder, great, use a spot welder. If you have a welder and you're good at welding, go for it. For simplicity, I'm just going to use the pop rivets to pop rivet it in place. And the sealer that I will be using is a high temperature sealer. This here I just picked up at Lowe's. It's a stove and fireplace cement and mortar. This is able to withstand 2100 degrees temperature, and so whenever sealing any part of the firebox or any portion that's going to get very hot, this is what we'll be using. This right here is the 9 inch by 6 1/8. What I will do is I'll set the scribe to 1 inch and mark 3 of the sides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, and this is going to be bent up at a 1 inch flange. Okay. Now for this next piece, which is the 10 inch, all we do is bend a 1 inch flange up. And that'll fit right there. Okay, while the camera was off, I did go ahead and make a 1 inch scribe here. Forgot to mention that while the camera was on. You'll see how this fitting looks. Now in bending this up, if you're going to do it on the brake, you have to bend one side, the end, then the other side. If you try bending both sides at once, then doing the end, you're going to have to do the end by hand. On this heavy gauge stuff, it isn't easy to get a nice sharp bend by hand. So if you just do the first side, second, then third, then you'll be able to do it. Now you can see how this is going to fit in. And once it's all together, this will bank up our heat exchanger, and then we'll get into how we're going to stand it off the shell of the heat exchanger so some ashes can be put around it for an insulation. Now for putting this together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sealer, and if you get too much, it's going to get messy, but you can always wipe it off after the fact. The main idea is we want it to be sealed in between the cracks. It'll prevent smoke from getting out of line, and it'll also prevent heat from escaping from the heat exchanger where we really don't want it to go. Okay. Put it in, line it up so it's at the front, clamp it down. Make sure that it's lined up on the inside, flush with one side. Then rivet away. One of the big mistakes that people do a lot of times is they drive the drill extremely fast. What that does on metal is it just burns up your drill bit. You won't get near as many, and when you're dealing with stainless steel where it's a very hard steel, you don't want to be driving your drill really fast. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and shut the camera off and pick back up after this is riveted. Once we're done with this, you'll notice that we've got this on the bottom, and I'm going to put a final sealer on this after everything's put together before it goes in the shell. So the next step is to put in these other two, and once again, just coat them, pop it down. Do make sure that this is squared up. If it's not square, take the time, grab a hold of it, pull the sides into square. If it's not square, it's going to give you fits. So do that, and then get back with you. Okay, I've finished this up, and I've actually had time to go ahead and seal my seam here. This was the 1-inch lap, and I just did the lap on the outside. I sealed it up with this sealant. I've sealed it up. Each place I've pop riveted it, and of course along the bottom also. So now I have this stainless steel heat exchanger. One of the things to watch out for when putting this together is that this will have a tendency to get scawampus, where it's not square. And so when you put it together, make sure everything's lining up, make sure everything's squared up, or else, like I said, you're going to have trouble later on.